The AmericasDemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, is made possible by contributions from our listeners. Want to do more? Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click Donate. And thank you for allowing us to be your voice. And if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. This week, healthcare organizer Jennie Pirkl on how Maine became the first state to expand Medicaid by a ballot initiative Tuesday, November 7th. Kansas State Senator Anthony Hensley on how legislators in his state confronted a bad tax cut bill and ended it. And Bill Press talks with Jess O'Connell, CEO of the Democratic National Committee, on the role of women in electing Doug Jones in Alabama and the DNC strategy to keep winning elections in the era of Donald Trump. Had enough of Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus, and Donald Trump? If you want the facts that you won't get from them or from the fake news sites of the alt-right, then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Last November, voters in Maine went to the polls and overwhelmingly voted yes to a ballot measure to expand Medicaid, allowing many more low-income residents to receive health insurance. That makes Maine the first in the nation to use a citizens' initiative to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. It took an enormous on-the-ground campaign, and Jennie Pirkl was in the middle of it. She's a healthcare organizer with Maine People's Alliance and served as the campaign manager for Mainers for Healthcare. And we say hello to Jennie Pirkl, a healthcare organizer with Maine People's Alliance and served as the campaign manager for Mainers for Healthcare. Jennie Pirkl, thanks so much for joining us today on AmericasDemocrats.org.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you with us. You know, the success of Maine Question 2, which is the ballot initiative that will expand Medicaid coverage to more than 70,000 people in Maine, began with a petition campaign that delivered more than 67,000 signatures to the Secretary of State. Describe the effort to collect those names.
Yeah, that's right. So we collected almost all of them actually on Election Day in 2016. And we were part of a fairly large coalition of groups across the state who had been working on this in the legislature for years and years, and we've gotten achingly close in Maine to passing it that way. We've passed it 5 times, and our governors vetoed it 5 times, and we came just a handful of votes short of overriding the veto 5 times, and so we finally decided we've got this other tactic we can try. And we did a bunch of organizing. We got volunteers from across the state to post up at polling locations on Election Day last year, and we're able to collect 66,000 signatures in one day. And a lot of that was actually from people from across the political spectrum. We had people coming up to us with their Make America Great Again hats on and their Trump T-shirts, signing the petition and talking about how they didn't have any health insurance or how their families or neighbors didn't have any health insurance. So it was amazing to see, and it was amazing to hear the stories coming back from the polling locations of how successful people were.
And Maine is now the first state in the nation to approve Medicaid expansion at the ballot box with a margin of victory that was much higher than expected. To what do you attribute the success?
Yeah, so there's a couple things here that I think that we in Maine have been doing for several years now that helped get us to this point. I think, we've had Governor LePage, who is very similar to Trump in his politics and in his stylings. We've had him as governor for 2 terms now, so we've kind of gotten used to the idea that we have to be bold and we have to talk about the issues, and I think that went a long way to our success. I think the other big thing that we did was we told personal stories. So this campaign was about real Maine people. We put them front and center. They were part of a leadership team that was helping make decisions about what the campaign was going to do next. They were in our ads and in our social media, and I really think that resonated with folks because they could really see themselves and their families and their neighbors reflected in the campaign. And of course, there were some folks who, have been doing a lot of work over the summer trying to get Senator Collins not to vote to repeal the ACA, and they saw this as a way to tell the folks in Augusta and in D.C. that people really want more health care, not less.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also got some help from the Fairness Project, which is a national organization that supports state and local ballot initiatives that promote economic fairness. Tell me what it was like working with them.
Yeah, so the Fairness Project has been a really great partner of Maine People's Alliance for a couple of years now. We also passed minimum wage on the ballot in last year on 2016, and the Fairness Project helped with that. They've just been a great resource and a great ally. They help connect us with folks in the other parts of the country and obviously help bring in some resources to the state to make sure that the campaigns have what they need in order to win. And it's been really great working with them for at least 2 cycles now on progressing real politics that really help people's lives.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Jennie Pirkl, healthcare organizer with Maine People's Alliance, and served as the campaign manager for Mainers for healthcare. Jennie, 1 in 5 people in Maine are on Medicaid. What are the health concerns they face, and what would they do if they did not receive Medicaid?
Yeah, the folks who are on Medicaid and who are previously in the coverage gap and who are newly going to get covered, they face the same health concerns that the rest of us do, and sometimes those are even exacerbated because they don't have access to the preventative care that could make some of those situations more easily under control. For example, we worked with this wonderful woman, Kathy, who's a hairdresser from mid-Maine, and she has COPD, but she didn't have any health insurance. So that meant that she couldn't go to the doctor when she wasn't feeling well. It meant that she didn't have access to the oxygen that she needed to just maintain her health and to know that she was going to be okay while she was at work. And I think there's a lot of folks out there, folks who have diabetes, folks who have cancer, who don't have access to the regular ongoing care and services that they need to stay healthy.
And here we are not helping them. It doesn't make any, we're the wealthiest nation in the world, and we're not helping our own people. It just doesn't make any sense. Part of your campaign was to emphasize the jobs that will get created under the Medicaid expansion. How will that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're estimating that about 6,000 new jobs can be created in Maine over the short period of time once we implement Medicaid expansion. And a bunch of that is that in our rural communities in particular, medical providers are some of the largest employers. And we've been seeing this trend in our state over the past several years of them having to scale back their services that they offer, particularly, again, in rural communities, because they're struggling financially. And a lot of them are starting to turn around, but I think that the Maine Hospital Association supported this campaign, and because that they realize that this is going to add ability to serve local communities and to grow their staff. And it also means that when people are healthier, they are better able to look for work and they're better able to maintain their jobs. And then also when there's more employees at a hospital, or it could just boost the whole local economy, like more small businesses will thrive, maybe be able to hire more people because there'll just be more people employed and having paychecks and money to spend in the local economy.
It's amazing the short-sightedness of folks that don't see this, that just don't understand that having healthy people means more people can work, they can work more efficiently, better. I mean, everybody wins in that scenario, but there's way too much pushback, of course. And along those lines, this story is not over. The expansion doesn't become law until 45 days after the legislature reconvenes on January 3rd. In the meantime, Republican Governor Paul LePage, whom you mentioned earlier, has vowed to block the measure. How will you continue this fight?
Yeah, that's right. We're certainly not done, but we've got the light is at the end of the tunnel here. We have had bipartisan support for this measure throughout the years. Like I said, we've come within just like 2 votes shy of being able to overturn the governor's veto. So there is large bipartisan support for this. Also, we won by, as you mentioned earlier, a huge margin. One of the, I think it's the largest margin any initiative has won by in the state since 1999. So that sets a huge precedent. And then the other thing is, so we've got a lot of support in the legislature to make sure that this goes well. But then when it comes right down to it, LePage is not legally allowed to just not implement the law. And he has no veto power in this instance. So, I mean, he's certainly blustering, and he's saying that he's not going to implement it. But if he really follows through on that and doesn't implement the law, we have legal recourse to go back and make sure that he does do what he needs to do.
Mm-hmm. And what he has to do. What he
has to do.
Yeah.
It's his job. Yeah.
Right. Do your job, son. Do your job.
Yeah.
Many states and even more politicians are closely watching what is happening in Maine. What's the lesson you hope they take away from what you've accomplished?
Yeah, I've had a lot of great conversations with people across the country, both policymakers and activists on the ground and organizers who are thinking about how can we do this in our state, what did it take, and what pushed you to the decision to just go for it. And I think the advice that I give them and the lesson that I hope people take away from this effort is that even in moments of political uncertainty, when it feels like everything is rolling backwards, it's up to us to make sure it keeps moving forward and doesn't just. We should not be just fighting to maintain the status quo. So there's a lot of work that we have to do right now with our current government makeup in D.C. to protect the things that already exist. But that's not a reason to not keep pushing for more when we know that the things that currently exist are not quite enough to actually take care of all of us. So I think the lesson I hope people learn is be bold and keep moving forward. There were a lot of people last summer who were not super psyched about us taking this to the ballot box, that they wanted to keep trying in the legislature. They were afraid that once Trump got elected, that what's the point of even doing it? The ACA is going to get repealed and it's not even going to be available to us. And our answer to that was people's lives are on the line. 157 people in Maine die every year because they don't have health insurance. It is up to us to, work with them and to make sure that they get what they need to survive. And this is no time to sit back and not keep pushing for more.
Well, and as you pointed out, you had people walking up and signing up, for this initiative, wearing the MAGA hats. So if that's not a message right there to every other state in the nation, and quite frankly to Washington D.C., then I don't know what is.
That's right. Yeah, I think this initiative showed, and I think there were some headlines out there the day after the election that Republicans are way out of step with what actual people want in terms of health care. And I think that applies to a lot of other specific issues as well. Minimum wage is another great example where states are winning that at ballot boxes year after year, and it's just not moving in the typical democratic ways we usually think things should move. But
right.
I think this is now the moment where people can really take things into their own hands and just bring things straight to the voters, and the voters know what they want, and they want systems in place that help take care of each other.
Absolutely. And Jennie, you all have done a fantastic job. We wish you continued success. Jennie Pirkl, healthcare organizer with Maine People's Alliance, and served as the campaign manager for Mainers for Healthcare, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Jennie, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to having you back again with us soon.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen to this americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats. But we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.
Social Security measure. I believe that we must pass legislation to provide medical care.
This is our tradition. When our grandparents came to America, it was the Democratic Party which said, welcome. It was the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy and others, who said that America belonged to all its people, not just a handful of the rich or a few giant corporations. That's why great leaders like FDR fought so hard for Social Security, and why JFK stood up to the insurance companies and their Republican allies to get Medicare. It's not just one thing, or one time, in one place. It's about a whole history of standing up to the Republicans and saying someone has to be on the side of regular working people in America, whether it's defending Social Security or just the way your loved ones are treated on the job. That's what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's why this message has been brought to you by the Democratic Party. Working people like you and me.
Paid for by 21st Century Democrats. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. Kansas State Senator Anthony Hensley joins us next with a remarkable turnaround story on the Kansas tax cut experiment. But right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Food corporations and their academic cohorts keep trying to make an industrial tomato to rival Mother Nature's product. And they keep failing. They might consider this instead, the Rutgers 250. It's a revived version of the classic hybrid tomato bred in 1934 by Rutgers University and Campbell Soup. Its excellent flavor and texture made the Rutgers variety the tomato of choice for years, eventually accounting for 60% of all tomatoes grown commercially in the U.S. But it fell out of favor in the 1960s when big industrial growers in California and Florida switched to hard and tasteless tomatoes bred to withstand the crushing power of the harvesting machines they had begun using. The Rutgers variety soon disappeared from grocery bins and was forgotten until 2009. That year, with the good food movement mushrooming and with consumers demanding that supermarkets sell truly flavorful tomatoes, plant breeders discovered that Campbell still had genetic material from the parent plants used 75 years earlier to develop the original Rutgers variety. So, for 8 years, they've been working with it again, using crossbreeding techniques that go back to Latin America's pre-Columbian natives. Slowly but surely, they brought back the Rutgers and its natural flavor, glowingly described as, quote, the very taste of summer. The resurrected Rutgers is not hard enough to be machine harvested and shipped across country, which is one of its major virtues. The fact that this tomato must be grown and marketed regionally is one step toward a decentralized, deindustrialized, and better food economy. This is Jim Hightower saying, instead of trying to squeeze nature into a high-tech corporate model, this tomato represents an understanding that our food system can and should cooperate with nature and foster the growth of regional economies.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. In 2012, Kansas Republican Governor Sam Brownback enacted a massive tax cut plan with a promise that supply-side economics would boost the local economy. 5 years later, faced with an exploding deficit, Democrat and Republican legislators in Kansas voted to roll back the tax cuts. The experiment was a failure, and now it's a cautionary tale for the rest of the nation. As Senate Minority Leader in Kansas, Democrat Anthony Hensley was pivotal in the rollback's success. And we say hello to Anthony Hensley, Democratic member of the Kansas Senate, where he has been the minority leader since 1996. Senator Hensley, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Sure, happy to be on.
And we're happy to have you with us. You know, if we were to go to Kansas, talk to residents about the GOP tax plan, we shouldn't be surprised if we hear, been there, done that. That would be in response, of course, to what is widely referred to as the Kansas tax cut experiment, a series of dramatic tax cuts enacted by Republican Governor Sam Brownback in 2012. What was Brownback hoping to achieve?
Well, the term Kansas tax cut experiment was Sam Brownback's own term. I mean, he was on the Morning Joe show on MSNBC, and that's exactly what he told them, that this was a real live experiment. And I guess he decided he was going to use Kansas taxpayers as the guinea pigs in this experiment. And what he was hoping to achieve is to implement the advice that Arthur Laffer gave him. Arthur Laffer was hired on for $75,000 to be a consultant. Arthur Laffer is the father of the trickle-down theory of economics, and he advised Brownback to go in and to cut taxes on LLCs, limited partnerships, down to zero, go to zero for them, and then dramatically cut individual income tax rates, reduce our tax brackets from 3 brackets down to only 2, and there would be this great growth in jobs and the economy in Kansas. And so he basically started out, with the idea that it would be a great economic boon to the state if we cut taxes. And State of the State messages, he said, "Look out, Texas, here comes Kansas," because obviously, people in Texas don't pay, but they do have very high property taxes, and of course they've got the oil reserves as their resource in order to fund state government. And so as a result of this Arthur Laffer tax philosophy, it just became an absolute disaster for the state's budget and the state's economy.
Well, and talk about the real impact of the tax cuts on the state's economy.
Well, the real impact was the job creation never occurred. We had multiple problems trying to fund the basic core services of state government. In fact, we had to make a lot of different budget cuts as a result. And the economy just did not perform like Arthur Laffer and Sam Brownback had predicted. And one of the other unfortunate parts of these tax cuts is that we ended up having to do away with the mortgage interest deduction. These were the so-called pay-fors. We did away with the child care tax credit. These items that taxpayers, particularly lower and middle income taxpayers, benefit from, we repealed a number of those things in order to pay for the Brownback tax cuts. The prediction on the LLC zero tax was there'd be about 191,000 small business people take advantage of that, when in fact there were 338,000. So it was pretty apparent to me and others that people were just changing their tax status in order to avoid paying taxes. And of course, the big beneficiaries of these tax cuts were the multinational corporations, the Koch brothers particularly, which is based, their Koch Industries is based in Wichita. And so they made out like bandits under the Sam Brownback tax cuts.
And of course, the promise of the tax cuts to businesses is that they will respond by investing in jobs, but that just didn't happen, did it?
It didn't happen. The example that was frequently used was doctor wouldn't pay taxes on his non-wage income, and yet his nurse and the receptionist, people who work for him, would continue to pay income taxes. And when you have, attorneys and doctors and engineers and people that really don't have a lot of employees on the payroll, they're more self-employed, the tax benefit that they get would, allow them maybe to take a vacation down in the Caribbean or do other things aside from being able to hire people. Because if you get a $10,000, $15,000 tax break, that's not enough money to employ people or to even employ one person. So the job creation aspect of this never did materialize.
We're speaking with Anthony Hensley, Democratic member of the Kansas Senate, where he has been the minority leader since 1996. Senator, a remarkable thing happened this past June. A GOP-led legislature actually got together enough votes to pass a veto-proof rollback of Governor Brownback's plan. How did that happen?
Well, it was over a combination of many years, many fiscal years that we had to go through where we had to make cuts to the budget. I've always used the example that 2007, 08, and 09 when the nation was going through its greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression, our budget shortfall in those 3 years was $600 million. But in 2013, after the Brownback tax cuts went into place, our budget shortfall in just 1 year was $700 million. So it had a disastrous effect on our budgets. We had to cut schools, social services. He had to continue to raid from our comprehensive highway fund. We had passed the 10-year Transportation Act that we passed in 2010. And that, of course, was before Brownback became governor. And, you know, at the end of the day, he had raided $2.7 billion from our highway plan in order to pay for his tax cuts. And in addition, of course, we repealed the mortgage interest deduction, the property tax deduction for income taxpayers, and also the child care tax credit. And so I think with this much misery and this kind of disastrous performance or hit to our general fund, moderate Republicans were successful then in the 2014 elections and came into the legislature then with the idea that they were going to try to roll back the tax cuts. And that's exactly what happened. The Senate changed from it being a very conservative legislative body to a more moderate body. And with more moderates in both the 2014 and the 2016 elections being elected, they were fed up with the problems we were faced with our general fund, and so they decided to override their own Republican governor in order to roll back these tax cuts.
Many see this as a cautionary tale to proponents of the GOP tax plan now working its way through the U.S. Congress. How do the two plans overlap?
Well, from what I understand, there are a lot of similar tax cuts in the congressional plans, both from the House and the Senate. I think, again, they're going to try to go dramatically decrease taxes on LLCs and limited partnerships, and dramatically increase rates. And I really think that Congress would be wise to follow the example of Kansas and not do what we did, because it'll have a disastrous effect on general fund obligations that the federal government has in their budget. They'll have to be cutting their budget in order to pay for the tax cuts. That's exactly what we had to do. And I just don't believe that they should follow our example. I would paraphrase what Sam Brownback said about Texas, look out, federal government, here comes Kansas. And that's a warning. You don't want to emulate what was done in Kansas at the federal level, because it's going to have a very adverse impact on the federal budget.
Yeah. Kansas, of course, is now in the early stages of a 2018 gubernatorial race. Governor Brownback is expected to step down, and already a record number of candidates have indicated their interest to take his place. With that in mind, what do you expect to be the long-term political impact of the Kansas tax experiment?
Well, what I hope for in 2018 is that we will again have success in electing both Democrats and moderate Republicans to the Kansas House of Representatives, and certainly re-electing those who, had the political courage to override a Republican governor's veto on his tax plan. If we have those kind of political successes, then we'll be able to keep, moderate thinking in place, and we'll be able to continue funding the general fund obligations that we have at an adequate level. The other issue we have in Kansas is we're under a court order right now. Our school finance system has been declared unconstitutional for, I believe now, the 12th time in the last 10 years. And we're going to have to come up with additional resources in order to adequately and fairly fund our schools in adherence, in compliance with this court order. And so that's another issue that's going to be, we're facing in the immediate session in 2018, even prior before the election. So, and then we've got, I think, good candidates on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. Of course, I am a Democrat, and I'll support our Democratic nominee. But hopefully we'll be able to elect a governor that will be more in line with moderate governors, both Republicans and Democrats, that we've had in the past. I would hate to think that we would elect a governor that was as conservative or even more conservative than Sam Brown back in 2018.
Okay. Anthony Hensley, Democratic member of the Kansas Senate, where he has been the minority leader since 1996, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Senator, we do appreciate your time with us today. We wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we can talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to keep the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, on the air, and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly podcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press talks with Jess O'Connell, CEO of the Democratic National Committee.
And you are in business today. Jess, you got a big smile on your face. Why?
I can't imagine why.
Whoa.
It's been a good week. It's been a good week. Good week for America. Good week for America. Really excited about Alabama.
I think that's absolutely right and a good way to put it. It's not just Alabama.
Right.
This reverberates way beyond
I think
Alabama.
we all woke up breathing a sigh of relief. But look, that was an uphill fight there, and that was a lot of hard work. We had a great candidate in Doug Jones, and he did a lot of the hard work. I mean, one of the things he did, which I think is really important, is he went to all 67 counties. He had conversations everywhere throughout the state. There wasn't anywhere he wouldn't go, anyone he wouldn't talk to. And I think that's been part of the strategy we've been talking about nationwide with every zip code counts. And so I think that's a really important thing. But this is exciting. It's important. It means a lot for Alabama, means a lot for America, means a lot for the United States Senate right now.
You just buried the lead for me. There are 67 counties in Alabama? Really?
Yep.
Gosh, I didn't think it was that big of a state.
Yeah, and we flipped 10 of them that were red in this race. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we flipped 10 of them that were red. I mean, look, you guys know this. This is the first time in a quarter century that Democrats have elected a senator there. This is the
last
big.
one, Hal Heflin. Yeah. Yep. Who decided not to Judge Hal Heflin.
Yeah.
Decided not to run for re-election. Then Jeff Sessions took his seat. Now we get it back. Curious, a friend of mine from Montgomery, told me the other day that so Doug Jones worked for Hal Heflin in the Senate, which is how he got to know Joe Biden.
Oh, interesting.
And so the whole full circle, Doug taking that seat and with Joe Biden's help this time. So it all kind of came together.
Pretty good mentors there, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell us about Doug Jones, by the way. There's a headline in Politico this morning that I must admit, I don't know. I've never met Doug Jones. Yeah. We didn't, I thought he ran a brilliant campaign. And he didn't try to make himself the center of attention because Roy Moore was stealing all the headlines in a bad way.
Yeah.
We don't know that much about Doug Jones. Politico this morning says he's a candidate who would make Bernie Sanders proud. I mean, is he a real lefty or is he a centrist or who is he?
Look, I think Doug Jones and Tom Perez has known Doug for 20 years, too. You talk about, again.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. In a lot of the civil rights work down there, voter protection, all kinds of things. Down in Alabama where Tom had done some legal work down there. Look, Doug Jones is terrific. I mean, a lot of people know the story about him prosecuting against the two men and the four African-American girls who were killed. That's
years
and years
when
ago.
Nobody had gone after them. He did.
That's right. He did, and I think that story did get out there. But I think what people don't know is that one of the reasons I think Doug Jones really won down there he led with his values. He didn't shy away from being a Democrat. He didn't shy away from things like standing up for the LGBT community when you had Roy Moore saying we should put gay people in jail. He didn't shy away.
Told me that.
Yeah, he told you that. Yeah,
2005,
exactly.
right?
That's right. I mean, he didn't shy away from things like choice. I mean, look, we had good people of faith that were coming out. I think we're in a time where people are voting on not just single issues. He didn't shy away from who he is. He didn't shy away from his democratic values. He's been a public servant his entire life, as you pointed out. He's been working for folks, and I do think that's what people are looking for. We're living in a time, as you guys know, where the Republicans are trying to take things away from people, whether it's health care, whether it's, deductions that they use to get by. They're trying to roll back all the progress that we've made. And when you think about the history of a southern state, you talked about the 67 counties. There's an interesting anecdote here. Lee County, and for Robert E. Lee, Donald Trump won that district by 24 points. Doug Jones won it by 17 this week. That's a 41-point spread.
I know.
In a county that hasn't gone for a Democrat since the Civil Rights Act in 1965. That's the coalition that Doug Jones brings together because of his authenticity, because of who he is, because he led with his values. And that's what I think makes us proud about electing Doug Jones.
Now, we have to acknowledge that we had a deeply flawed candidate in Roy Moore, even before the sexual allegations came out. But
that's a
sort of
fact.
the icing on the cake, right? Yeah. But still, can we walk away from Alabama with the lesson that Democrats can run and maybe even win anywhere?
Yeah. I think, look,
even in deep red states.
Absolutely. They had a deeply flawed candidate in Roy Moore, no question, but they have deeply flawed policies, right? I mean, this is not just about the candidates, it's about the policies. And I think what we learned in Alabama, what we learned in Virginia, too, is that Democrats know how to build a winning coalition to win. It's obviously led by African Americans in Alabama. By the way, it was led by African Americans in Virginia, too. Yep. Black women, of course, leading the way, as they always do for the Democratic Party. And we owe them more, and we need to do more to acknowledge that. But also, it was a coalition. We talked about Lee County. I mean, winning a county like that is important for folks that I think we were not reaching in 2016. Talk about women. Doug Jones won women by 16 points. And I think an important thing to note is he also had a 20-point margin on independent women. So there were women who are paying attention to what Donald Trump and what's going on in the Republican Party right now around a lot of this sexual assault stuff. And it's impacting the suburban women, those independent women. And another, I think, part of this winning coalition is millennials. We saw that in Virginia.
Yes.
We saw a double-digit jump for Governor-elect Ralph Northam. But we also saw a 20-point victory for Doug Jones in Alabama. So this is the coalition that will take us into 2018. And I think, Republicans want us to believe this is how they're sleeping at night. They want us to believe that there was just one flawed candidate and this is just one race.
Right.
But we've won over 100 seats since Donald Trump was elected.
Whoa. Slow down. What?
Democrats have won over 100 seats since Donald Trump was elected.
Where?
All over the country. Special elections, up and down the ballot. A third of them have been flips from red to blue. So 33 seats have been flipped from red to blue in deep red states, 4 in Oklahoma, a couple in Iowa, a couple in New Hampshire. All over the country, we've been winning. In the South, in the heartland, on the coasts, and we've been winning at every level. So I think Republicans want us to believe that this was some terrible candidate they had nothing to do with. But the reality is that Democrats have been building this coalition. We're not doing it in a flashy way. We're just doing the hard work of organizing, going out, talking in communities, and it's working.
And so those 100 seats are state legislative
Many
races,
of them, yeah.
City council, mayors,
up and down
the ticket.
And again, the reason I can sit here and tell you that is because the DNC has shifted its focus to make sure that we're focused on winning elections from the school board all the way up to the presidency. And that is a new shift for the DNC. We've been focused on that since Tom Perez came on board. We've been focused on investing in mayor's races. We've won a bunch of mayor's races. We just had that great...
One of them in Alabama.
Right. Yeah. We just had Alabama. We also
Randall Woodfin?
Yeah, Randall. Yeah. And we had one the week before in Atlanta with Keisha Lance Bottoms. So, look, we're playing everywhere. And we're building these coalitions to win. and we're investing, and we're doing the hard work of organizing. We're just getting back to basics. We owe voters a conversation, and we stopped having those conversations everywhere. We're doing that now.
That's so smart.
Absolutely.
Because, it's very easy to say we're going to resist Donald Trump and Roy Moore is a bad candidate and whatever other candidate comes up, they're bad candidates, but you've got to have something to offer. You've just got to have something to offer.
And if you ask any one of those candidates that's won, they're going to tell you the same thing that I will, which is that what people are talking about, not surprisingly, are things that impact them every single day. It's the kitchen table issues. It's about jobs. It's about whether they're going to take health care away. It's about what's happening with this atrocious tax bill. It's things that impact them every day. They want to be able to send their kids to a good school. They want to be able to afford either college or skills training. They want jobs of the future. They want to hold on to their health care. That's what people care about. And so all of this culture war stuff, all these other things that the Republicans are engaged in right now, that is not what Americans are focused on.
So what does Doug Jones' victory in Alabama mean for Democrats in 2018?
Well, I think it's part of a roadmap. I think the other lesson I think that we've learned is...
It must put some bounce in your step.
It puts some... Yes, look, this was a much-needed win. It was a much-needed win. It was a moral victory and a real victory, and I think we needed it. I think it's a great way to cap off a strong year for Democrats and a strong year for the work that we've been doing. And I also think what it does is it shows us that the entire country is in play. As we look to 2018, we have a big map. We have work to do in the Senate to defend some seats, but we have some great opportunities to pick up Senate seats in states that are not dissimilar from Alabama, where you can build a winning coalition. My home state of Arizona, you look at Nevada. I was just with Jackie Rosen last night. You have women running in these states that are working to build coalitions. So I think we've got a terrific opportunity.
Suddenly Tennessee is in play.
And Tennessee, absolutely. We've got this terrific opportunity in the Senate. You've got an incredible House map where our colleagues at the DCCC and others have done a tremendous job to expand the map. You're looking at competitive 80, 85 seats. That's enormous. I mean, we have a wealth of candidates that are running, and they're candidates like Doug Moore. They're candidates that are local, or Doug Jones. I'm sorry, Doug Moore. There we go. Doug Jones. But they're local to their communities, and they're speaking their language. And so we're super excited about that opportunity. But look, this is uphill. We have a lot of work to do. We have a long time to go before next November. And we've got to keep having conversations. We got to keep showing up with our offering. We've got to keep showing up with our vision. And we'll still have to keep holding the Republicans accountable. We're going to have to do both.
Yeah. I mean, the Senate does look better, as you point out. Arizona, Nevada in play, now Tennessee in play with Corker resigning, and Phil Bradenson, the former governor, very popular.
That's right. Yep.
Won every county in Tennessee, is running. And now we got Alabama, which we never thought we would have, right?
It's terrific, yeah.
But it's still there. 20. I think the last I looked to 23. I think Democratic seats to up, and 8 Republican seats.
Yeah, no, that's right. And look, and of those, the 10,
math still favors the Republicans.
The math is tough. 10 of those seats are in, let's be honest, 10 of those are in states that Donald Trump won.
Yes.
So we know we've
Indiana
got...
and others. Yeah.
That's right. We've got work to do there. We've got Claire McCaskill in Missouri that we've got to defend. We've got Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin and others. So we have some work to do there.
But still, with Doug Jones, now the margin is 1, right?
Yeah.
And so
winning is better.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Winning is better.
It should be a slogan for the Democratic Party. Winning is better.
Winning is better.
Yeah. Boy, amen. And in terms of, I think also, this will get. I think we've already seen it. This will really get Democrats at every level excited around the country, activists and donors and candidates and everybody saying,
I think
we're on our way back.
Totally. And Democrats are back. I think what Alabama did was it nationalized the work that's being done. I think that in some of the states that we talked about where we've had elections, people believe. They see that we can win. They see that if we do the work, we get back to basics, we can win. But I believe now with Alabama, the whole country sees what's happening. Again, Republicans will have us believe that this was a one-off, but it's not. We know that Americans are fed up. They're fed up with, indecent candidates and indecent politicians and Donald Trump and Blake Farenthold and, a candidate like Roy Moore, but they're also fed up with the indecent policies. They see what Republicans are trying to do. They see that they don't have their back, and they're looking for an alternative, and it's incumbent upon Democrats to stand up, be clear in our values. When we lead with our values, we win.
The Democratic Party, Jess O'Connell is with us from, not O'Donnell, Jess O'Connell from the Democratic National Committee, CEO of the DNC. And you can always follow at democrats.org, the good work of the DNC. One of the big issues now, Nina Turner was in last week with us talking about the recommendations of the Unity Commission.
That's right.
The Unity Commission, right. And the reforms that they've suggested in terms of superdelegates, closed primaries, caucuses, all the way down the line, which goes to the Rules and Bylaws Committee next, right? And they meet in...
that is a great question. I believe they meet... Well, they definitely meet next year. It's in the first quarter.
I think it's in March, maybe.
I was going to say it's March as well. Yeah,
okay.
I think it is March.
All right. So what's going to happen to these recommendations? They would cut superdelegates by 60%.
Yeah.
It's going to happen?
I can't speak to what the Rules and Bylaw Committee will do, but what I can say is that Tom Perez and Keith Ellison have been out there and talking about these recommendations. I think that they bring some much-needed reforms, some much-needed transparency. We want to open up this process, and I think that we have stated that we are excited about these recommendations, and we'll see what happens. But I think these are good recommendations. I know the chairman thinks these are good recommendations.
I think the chairman and the vice chairman. Is that what
Deputy Chairman, yeah. Deputy Chairman Ellison.
I think they both not just talked about that; they both endorsed them. Correct?
Yeah, look, we think these are good, and there's been. I just want to give a shout out to this commission. This has been almost a year long process. Again, a commission set up by Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders following the election, and they've done some really good work. It's all been public. You could watch it on C-SPAN. You can follow along with the work that they've done. And it's been a really thoughtful group of folks who care about our party and who care about the future and how we bring more people into our party, how we make it easier to vote, how we choose our nominees. And so I think this is really important, and we do endorse that effort and that work.
Why don't you get rid of superdelegates altogether? I mean, maybe that's the extreme point of view, but it just seems to me if from California, right? California says we're going to vote for Ron Wyden. I mean, just pick a candidate, right? Then it seems to me the delegates from California, they ought to follow the will of the people.
Yeah.
No? Why have some people who can, just kind of do whatever they want, buck the party?
Yeah. Well, look, I think what they've come to, I trust in the Unity Commission and the work that they've done, which is a lot of people who come from a lot of different vantage points on this. And I think that they've made a strong recommendation to meet sort of somewhere in the middle on that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a good sort of next step. I think we're going to have a really robust primary season as we look to 2020. Democrats are going to field, I expect, an awful lot of candidates. We have sort of a running tally of what we, guess of what we think it might be, but I think there are going to be a lot of people who run. And so where we can make fixes to the process that bring more people in, allow more candidates to have an opportunity to compete, I think that's really important. But I leave it to the good work of the DNC members and the Rules Commission to make those decisions.
And one other thing we've talked about with Nina too are closed primaries. This is a pet peeve of mine. I hate to keep bringing it up, but I see my vision of the Democratic Party is the open arms party, the welcoming party. We want independents to come in. We want people who haven't been Democrats all their life to come in and vote for our Democratic candidates, and we ought to welcome them and say, thanks for coming on board, right? Instead, there seems to be this attitude, take New York State, where you have to be registered in New York State as a Democrat like a year before almost, or you can't vote in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
I think that's suicidal.
I think the New York example, and there are a couple of others like that, where the timeline just seems out foolish, right? It just seems out of bounds and meant to sort of keep people away. And I think that's something that's going to be addressed. That's absolutely one of the issues that people have talked about. I think what some people might say in terms of the open primaries is people feel strongly about some of this in both directions, in terms of being registered as a Democrat to be able to participate. I think some people in some states, this isn't true of every state, but in some states, I think they worry that there will be foul play or foolishness of people trying to tip the scales. Look, these are just the arguments, right, that some people have on these sides. But
I've heard that, as a former Democratic chair of California, I have heard that for so long. Yeah. And it's sort of like, to me, it's like the Republican cries of voter fraud. Right?
Yeah.
They always say it. They've never proven it.
California's blue, right? So in California, you don't have the same challenges that some of the states might have where that could be.
That's a claim that's never been backed up by any evidence that I've seen at all. Yeah. It reminds me of people like at some exclusive golf club who say you can only play on this golf course if you're a member of the golf course. Well, okay, I understand that, but I don't want the Democratic Party to be like the Congressional Country Club.
Yeah.
Or a burning tree where women aren't allowed.
Yeah. All right. I'll add that to my list. Look, I think what I am excited about and what I think is important as we move forward is, again, I really believe this commission has done the really hard work. They've dug in a way that you're talking about and really tried to look at the entire country and where we are. And I think they've made some really great recommendations. The chairman is behind them. Deputy chairman is behind them. I think the members are going to take a really hard look at this, as you said, in the spring. And I look forward to a more transparent and open party because we do need to grow our party. And more important than the party building, we just need people with our shared values to get out and vote and to know more about the process. And we ought to be leading the charge on that. And I think we will be.
Well, get out and vote. But also, people are really jazzed up right now. And not everybody, I think there are more people who've come forward to run as candidates.
Yeah.
A lot of them, tens of thousands of them through Emily's List, your former organization.
Yeah.
Just doing such an incredible job. But not everybody can run for office. What can other people do? What are you asking? There are Democrats out there who really feel pumped right now, right? They want to plug in. They want to do something. How do they get involved, and what can they do?
There are so many ways to get involved, and thankfully so many people are. And I think first and foremost is just keep at it, because it's going to require persistence. It's going to require not getting tired. Our outrage meter is going to be up at our highest level every single day. There's a million things to be outraged about. So I encourage people to just practice good self-care during this time, but get out there and look. You can participate through the Democratic Party at Democrats.org. We have a lot of ways. One of the things that we did throughout the country, but in Alabama especially too, was we ran a whole texting program, texting out the vote, communicating with voters. In fact, it was terrific on election night as we were winning. All of the folks that we had texted to get out the vote were texting us back with all kinds of excited.
Oh, wow.
It was so you're building these connections. So there's a way to build connections, and it was really powerful.
It's a whole new level.
It's a whole new level. You can help from no matter where you are, right? But locally is the most important. You can help via your state parties who are running all kinds of programs. Again, 365 days a year. We're not just getting to work in the final weeks before an election. So you can call up your local state Democratic Party right now. They'll put you to work. There are also a lot of great groups out there that are doing important work. So I say, pick your community. We are all fighting for shared values. Pay attention to what's happening. We're going to have a budget fight ahead that's coming. We're going to have to be involved in. We're going to have a fight for Dreamers and DACA that's still coming and needs to come. We still have this tax fight ahead. It's not done yet. And keep making calls. We broke the congressional switchboard on healthcare. Let's keep breaking it. Yeah. I think we just can't let the pressure up. And I know that people get tired. Tag a friend in. You need a minute, tag a friend in, and then, get back at it. Yeah. But again, get involved in community. Democrats are about rebuilding community around shared values. What's a party? It's a people who share values.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And the Democratic values are clear. We know what we stand for.
So it's Democrats.org, and it's just us also some of these great organizations. We've talked to a lot of them. Our Revolution, Indivisible, Emily's List.
Absolutely. Run for something.
Run for
Swing
something
left.
is another one. Yeah,
Swing
yeah.
left.
There's so many out there. That's where the energy
Higher
is.
heights.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
And thank you for a great job. And thanks for coming in today. Pamela Levy from
This
Mother
is
Jones.
the Bill Press Show.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Jennie Pirkl, Anthony Hensley, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us. Support the americasdemocrats.org podcast, a project of 21st Century Democrats, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page.